The day I was about to make my final student loan payment, a lawyer's letter showed up with my full name on it. 9 years ago, my parents smiled and said independence meant I would pay for college alone. Now they want my signature to save a property I never knew existed. I told myself I'd go once, ask questions, and leave. But the truth in that folder was built to follow me. The laptop screen glowed with a singular, terrifying number: $1,242.16. It was the exact remaining balance of a burden I had been carrying since I was 18 years old. My finger hovered over the trackpad, trembling just enough to be noticeable. In the grand scheme of the American economy, $1,200 was a rounding error. To me, it was the final link in a chain that had been wrapped around my ankles for 9 years. I sat at my kitchen island, a glass of wine sitting untouched to my right. It was a bottle of Cabernet that cost me $14, which was a splurge. For years, my budget for alcohol had been non-existent, or limited to whatever was on happy hour special at the dive bar down the street. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration, but the room felt quiet, almost reverent. I clicked distinct confirmation buttons. 1, 2, 3, processing. The little wheel on the screen spun, a digital hourglass counting down the seconds until my freedom. When the confirmation screen finally popped up, payment successful, I expected to feel an explosion of joy. I expected to want to scream or dance or call someone. Instead, I felt the air leave my lungs in a long, shuddering exhale. I slumped forward, resting my forehead against the cool granite of the counter. It was over. The federal loans, the private loans, the interest that accumulated like mold in a damp basement, all of it was gone. I was 32 years old, and for the first time in my adult life, my paycheck belonged entirely to me. The silence of the apartment wrapped around me. I had curated this space with the same ferocity I applied to my debt. Everything here was mine. The second-hand mid-century armchair I had reupholstered myself, the stack of hardcover books on the coffee table, the peace of mind that came from knowing no one could take this away from me, because I had not borrowed a single cent from anyone I knew to get it. My mind drifted back, as it often did when I looked at my bank account, to the kitchen table in my childhood home. I was 18. The acceptance letter to the state university was sitting in the center of the table, a beacon of possibility. I had been accepted into the journalism program, a dream I had nurtured since I was 12. I remembered the smell of lemon polish and the pot roast my mother had cooking in the oven. It was a Sunday. Sundays were usually safe days. My father had sat opposite me, his hands clasped on the table. He looked like a man preparing to deliver a sermon. My mother stood by the sink, drying a dish she had already dried 3 times. "Stella, we are so proud of you," my father had said. His voice was rich, the kind of voice that commanded attention in boardrooms. "But we have been talking, and we believe that handing you an education would be doing you a disservice." I remembered blinking at him, not understanding. I assumed he meant I needed to keep my grades up, or maybe get a part-time job for spending money. He continued, "Real character is built through struggle. Stella, if we pay for your college, you will never learn the value of a dollar. You will never know what it means to truly earn your place in the world. We want you to be independent. So, starting now, you are on your own financially, for tuition, for housing, for everything." I had looked at my mother, waiting for her to jump in, to say he was joking, or to offer a compromise. She just gave me a tight, encouraging smile. "It is for your own good, sweetheart." She had said, "You will thank us later." They had the money. We went on vacations to Europe. They drove new cars every 3 years. They remodeled the house whenever a trend changed. This was not a matter of inability. It was a matter of philosophy, a philosophy that conveniently kept their bank account full while I spent the next decade drowning. I snapped back to the present, taking a sip of the wine. It tasted sharp, acidic. "Thank you," I whispered to the empty room. "I suppose I should thank you," but the gratitude did not come. What came instead was a reel of memories I usually tried to suppress. The scholarship applications, God, the applications, I treated them like a second job. I spent hours writing essays about adversity, packaging my trauma into 500-word bites for committees to consume. I begged for $500 here, $1,000 there. I remembered the winter of my sophomore year. My car, a '98 Honda Civic with a rust patch on the hood shaped like a continent, had broken down 3 times in 1 month. The heater did not work. I drove to my 6 a.m. shift at the diner wrapped in 2 coats, seeing my breath fog up the windshield, scraping the inside of the glass with a credit card while I drove. I remembered the panic attacks in the library bathroom, the feeling of my heart hammering against my ribs because I was short $70 for a textbook, and without it, I would fail the class, lose my scholarship, and drop out. I learned to hide that panic behind a mask, a calm, steady smile. When friends asked if I wanted to go to Cabo for spring break, I did not say, "I have $12 in my checking account." I said, "I actually have a lot of work to catch up on, but you guys have fun." I became an expert at the performance of stability. I never let anyone see the cracks. Not my professors, not my friends, and certainly not my parents. When I saw them at Christmas, I never asked for a dime. I brought cheap gifts I had bought on clearance, ate their food, listened to their stories about their latest cruise, and nodded when my father asked if I was keeping my nose to the grindstone. "I am doing great," I always said, and eventually, it became true. I landed a job at a mid-sized marketing firm. I worked my way up to senior copywriter. I freelanced on the weekends. I paid double the minimum on my loans every month, living like a monk so I could kill the debt that haunted me. And now, tonight, the ghost was dead. I finished the wine and stood up to rinse the glass. As I dried it, I heard the mail slot in the front door clatter. It was late for mail, but the postal service had been unpredictable lately. I walked to the door, expecting a flyer for a pizza place or a final utility bill. On the floor, lying face up on the hardwood, was a single thick envelope. It was creamy, heavy cardstock, expensive. The return address was embossed in black ink. Holloway and Associates, attorneys at law. My stomach dropped. The sensation was immediate and physical, a cold flush that started in my neck and spread to my fingertips. Attorneys. Why was I getting a letter from an attorney? I picked it up. It felt substantial. I tore the flap open, my hands less steady than they had been when I paid off the loan. I pulled out a single sheet of watermarked paper. "Dear Ms. Jenkins, we represent your parents, Robert and Eleanor Jenkins, in regard to a time-sensitive family matter. We request your presence at our offices on Thursday, October 14th, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to discuss a restructuring of assets that requires your immediate attention. Please consider this matter urgent. Sincerely, Marcus Vance, Esquire." I read the letter 3 times. A time-sensitive family matter. The first thought was illness. Someone was dying. That was the only reason you would summon an estranged but not technically estranged daughter to a law office. Dad had a heart condition? Mom had found a lump? But the language, it was so cold, so sterile. Restructuring of assets. You did not restructure assets when someone was dying. You called them on the phone and wept. This read like a contract dispute. It read like I was being audited, not invited into a family crisis. I walked back to the kitchen and grabbed my phone. My thumb hovered over my mother's contact name. We spoke maybe once a month. Superficial check-ins. How is the job? Fine. How is the garden? Blooming. I pressed the call button. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was bright, airy, with the background hum of what sounded like the television. "Stella. What a nice surprise. We were just talking about you." "Hi, Mom," I said, keeping my voice level. "I just got a letter. From a lawyer named Marcus Vance. Oh, good. The mail is so slow these days. We were worried it would not get there in time." "Mom, what is this?" I looked at the letter again. It says, "I have to come to a law office. Is everything okay? Is Dad okay?" She laughed. A light, tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge. "Oh, do not be dramatic. Sweetheart, everyone is fine. Healthy as horses. Your father just got his cholesterol numbers back, and they are better than ever. Then why am I being summoned by an attorney? It is just a formality, she said, her tone shifting slightly. She adopted what I called her hostess voice. Polite, vague, and utterly impenetrable. We just need to discuss something as adults. It is a family matter, and your father thought it would be best to handle it in a professional setting. We want to make sure everything is done correctly. What family matter? I pressed. Mom, I'm not driving an hour to the city without knowing what I'm walking into. It is nothing bad, she insisted, and I could hear the tightness creeping in. Just come to the meeting. Stella, it is important to us. We just want to get everyone on the same page regarding the future. The future. The word hung there, heavy and ambiguous. Can you give me a hint? Does this have to do with the house? The will? Stella, please, I cannot discuss details over the phone. It is complicated. Just trust us. We will explain everything on Thursday, okay? She waited. It was a test. It was always a test. If I pushed too hard, I was being difficult. If I refused, I was being ungrateful. Fine, I said. Thursday at 2? Wonderful. Wear something nice, okay? Mr. Vance is very old school. She hung up before I could ask what wearing something nice had to do with a family emergency. I stood there holding the phone, the silence of the apartment no longer feeling like freedom. It felt like the calm before a storm I had not forecast. I needed a second opinion. I dialed Lena. Lena had been my lifeline since our sophomore year of college. She was the one who had driven me to the mechanic when my Civic died. She was the one who bought me peanut butter and jelly when my meal plan ran out. She was currently a project manager for a construction firm, and she had a nose for nonsense that was sharper than a bloodhound's. I read her the letter over the phone. Do not go, Lena said immediately. What? I have to go. It is my parents. Stella. Normal families do not hire attorneys to tell you good news. She said. Her voice was tinny through the speaker, but the skepticism was clear. If they wanted to give you money, they would write a check. If they were dying, they would call you crying. If they want you in a lawyer's office, it is because they need a signature that you would not give them if you were sitting on their couch. That is paranoid, I said, though I knew she was right. Is it? Lena asked. Remember who we are talking about. These are the people who let you eat instant noodles for 4 years to build character. You think they suddenly want to have a warm and fuzzy chat about your inheritance? Maybe they realize they were wrong, I suggested, knowing how weak it sounded. Maybe they want to make amends. Maybe they want to help me now that they see I have made it on my own. Lena sighed. I could picture her rolling her eyes, pushing her glasses up her nose. Listen, I know you want that to be true. I want that to be true for you, but read the letter again. Restructuring of assets. That means money is moving around. And they need you to either get out of the way or facilitate it. I looked at the paper. The watermark was a subtle linen weave. I have to go. Lena, I said quietly, if I don't, I will just wonder. I will obsess over it. She softened. I know you do. Just promise me one thing. What? Do not sign anything. Not a birthday card, not a parking validation, and certainly not a legal document. If they put paper in front of you, you put your hands in your lap and you say, I need to show this to my own lawyer. Even though you do not have one, I promised. I said. I hung up, but the nausea lingered. Lena was right. I was already bargaining with myself. I was telling myself that I would go to this meeting, hear them out, and if it was nonsense, I would walk away. I would treat it like a business meeting. I was a professional now. I negotiated ad campaigns with budgets larger than my parents' net worth. I could handle Robert and Eleanor Jenkins. Thursday arrived with a gray spitting rain that made the city look like a watercolor painting left out in the damp. I took the afternoon off work, telling my boss I had a personal appointment. I dressed in my best suit, a charcoal blazer and trousers that I had bought after my last promotion. It was tailored, sharp, and made me feel armored. The law office was located in a glass tower downtown, the kind of building that required a security pass just to use the elevator. I rode up to the 42nd floor, my ears popping as the numbers climbed. The reception area of Halloway and Associates smelled of leather polish and expensive cologne. A receptionist with a headset smiled at me and gestured toward a double door. "They are expecting you, Ms. Jenkins, Conference Room B." I walked down a long hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than my student loans. My heels clicked on the marble floor, a sharp, rhythmic sound that echoed too loudly. I took a deep breath, fixed my "I've got it" smile on my face, the same one I used when I was 18 and terrified, and opened the heavy oak door. The room was vast. One wall was entirely glass, offering a panoramic view of the skyline. In the center was a massive mahogany table that shone under the recessed lighting. My parents were sitting on one side. My father was wearing a navy suit, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. He looked distinguished, successful. The picture of the self-made man he always claimed to be. My mother was in a cream-colored blouse and pearls, her hands folded primly on the table. At the head of the table sat a man who could only be Marcus Vance. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with a face that was handsome in a way that felt manufactured. He had a legal pad in front of him and a fountain pen resting on top of it. But what caught my eye? What made my steps falter for just a fraction of a second? Was the folder in front of him. It was a thick, manila file, and on the tab, written in sharp black marker, was my name, Stella Jenkins. It looked like a medical file, or a criminal record. It looked like my life had been reduced to paperwork before I even walked in the room. "Stella," my father boomed. Standing up, he came around the table and enveloped me in a hug. He smelled of sandalwood and starch. "You look fantastic." "Doesn't she look fantastic?" "Eleanor?" "She looks tired," my mother said, staying in her seat but smiling warmly. "You are working too hard." "Honey," I pulled away from my father, keeping my distance. "Hello, Dad, Mom, and this is Marcus Vance," my father said, gesturing to the attorney. "He has been helping us with some estate planning." "Mr." Vance stood and extended a hand. His grip was firm, dry, and professional. "A pleasure. Miss Jenkins, thank you for coming on such short notice." I sat in the empty chair opposite my parents. I placed my purse on the floor and folded my hands on the table, mirroring my mother. "So," I said, skipping the pleasantries, "what is the emergency?" The letter said time sensitive. My father laughed, a hearty chuckle that felt out of place in the quiet room. Lawyers always use dramatic language, don't they? "Marcus, it is just standard procedure." He sat back down, leaning forward on his elbows, looking at me with an expression of intense pride. I realized, with a jolt, that he was looking at me like I was an investment that had finally matured. "We were just talking about you, Stella," he said, "about how well you have done. We know it wasn't easy. We know we were hard on you." I said nothing. I let the silence stretch. "But look at you now," he continued. "You have a great career. You are debt-free. We heard you paid off the last of those loans. That is an incredible achievement for a young woman your age." "How did you know that?" I asked sharply. "I just paid it 2 days ago." My mother waved a hand dismissively. "We just keep tabs. Sweetheart, we are your parents. We worry." The attorney, Mr. Vance, cleared his throat gently. He opened the folder with my name on it. He slid a document across the mahogany surface. It stopped perfectly in front of me, aligned with the edge of the table. "What your father is trying to say, Ms. Jenkins, is that your parents are very impressed with your financial responsibility. Your credit score is excellent. Your debt-to-income ratio is now 0. You have built a very stable profile." I looked down at the document. It was thick, bound with a staple in the corner. The title page read, "Refinancing Agreement and Guarantorship." I looked up. "What is this?" My father smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes anymore. It was a business smile now. "We are restructuring some of our holdings. Stella, there is a commercial property we acquired a few years ago. A fantastic opportunity. But the current lending climate is tricky. The banks are being difficult with older investors. They want to see a younger, More active income stream attached to the refinancing package. He paused, waiting for me to understand. I stared at him, the pieces clicking together slowly, horrifically. You want me to co-sign a loan? I asked. Not just a loan, my mother interjected softly. It is an investment. We are building something for the family, for you, eventually. Mr. Vance tapped the paper with his pen. It is a formality, really. Your parents have significant equity. But to secure the prime interest rate, which saves the family thousands of dollars a month, we need a co-signer with your specific financial profile. A young professional with zero debt and a high credit score. I felt the room tilt slightly. 9 years. For 9 years, they had watched me scrape change from my car console to buy gas. They had watched me work double shifts on Christmas Eve. They had watched me age 5 years in the span of 2 because of the stress of that debt. And they had done it. They claimed to teach me independence, to teach me that no one owed me anything. And now, the moment, the literal moment, I had clawed my way out of that hole. They were standing at the edge, holding a rope, asking me to tie it around my waist and jump back in for them. I looked at the property address listed on the front page. 4402 Oakwood Drive. I had never heard of it. I looked at my father. You want me to put my name, my credit, which I just spent a decade building, on a property I have never seen, for a loan I did not ask for? My father's face hardened. Just a fraction. It was the look he gave waiters when they brought the wrong wine. We are asking you to step up. Stella, we raised you to be capable. We made you capable. Now we need you to use that capability to help the family. It is what adults do. The audacity was so pure, so crystalline, that I almost laughed. I looked at the attorney, who was watching me with the blank, predatory gaze of a shark in a suit. I looked at the folder with my name on it. My life, categorized, analyzed, and deemed useful. I did not reach for the pen. I looked my father in the eye. Tell me about the property. I said. My father blinked. It is just a building. Stella. A holding. Why does it matter? Because, I said, my voice steady, sounding more like the woman I had become than the child they remembered. If you want me to buy it, I need to know what I'm paying for. The pen lay on the mahogany table like a weapon that had been politely offered to me. Handle first. It was a heavy black lacquer fountain pen, the kind designed to make a signature feel like an event of historical significance rather than a financial noose. I did not pick it up. Instead, I leaned back in the leather chair, crossing my arms over my chest. The movement was small, but in the stillness of the conference room, it felt like I had thrown a chair through the window. So, I said, my voice deliberately flat, let me make sure I understand this correctly. You want me to co-sign a refinancing agreement for a commercial property I did not know existed, owned by a holding company I have never heard of, to secure a loan for 2 people who told me 9 years ago that financial independence was the single most important character trait a human being could possess. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. My mother, Eleanor, let out a small, wounded puff of air. She looked at my father, then at the attorney, her eyes wide and shimmering with instant, weaponized moisture. Stella, she said, her voice trembling just the right amount. You make it sound so transactional. It is a transaction. Mom, I said, we are in a law office. There is a contract on the table. That makes it transactional by definition. My father, Robert, cleared his throat. He adjusted his cufflinks. A nervous tic I remembered from my childhood whenever he was about to deliver bad news or a lecture. You are twisting this. Stella, this is not about the past. This is about the future. The Jenkins family holdings, that is the entity on the deed, is something we built for us, all of us. I looked at the cover page of the document again. Jenkins Family Holdings, LLC. I am not a member of this LLC, I said. I looked at Marcus Vance. Am I? The attorney shifted in his seat. He was good. I gave him that. He didn't flinch, but his eyes tightened at the corners. Currently, The managing members are Robert and Eleanor Jenkins, Vance said smoothly. However, the structure of the refinancing deal allows for a guarantor to be added to the deed as a conditional beneficiary. It is a very standard way to leverage generational wealth. Leverage, I repeated. That is a nice word. Stella, please, my mother said, reaching across the table as if to touch my hand, though she stopped short when I didn't uncross my arms. We are asking for help. Is that so terrible? We are a family. Families help each other. It is teamwork. The word hit me like a physical slap. Teamwork. I thought back to the summer after my freshman year. I had come home for 3 days to do laundry and sleep in a bed that didn't smell like dorm room mildew. I had mentioned, casually, that I was worried about the rising cost of textbooks for the fall semester. My mother had been chopping vegetables for a salad. She hadn't even looked up. We are all on our own paths. Stella, she had said then, your father and I are a team. You are building your own team. That is how life works. Now, apparently, the roster had changed because they needed a designated hitter. I uncrossed my arms and placed my hands on the table. Palms down. I have a few questions before I even consider reading this, I said. Fire away, my father said, leaning back, looking relieved that we were moving from emotional standoff to logistics. He thought he could win on logistics. He thought I was still the 18-year-old who didn't know what an amortization schedule was. 1, I said, why do you need me? You have assets. You have the house. You have the cars. You have this property. Apparently, why does the bank need my signature? Vance answered before my father could. The lending landscape has tightened significantly in the last 18 months. Ms. Jenkins, banks are risk-averse. While your parents have significant equity, their liquidity is tied up. Lenders today prefer to see a steady, W-2 income stream to stabilize the debt-to-income ratio on the application. He paused, searching for a diplomatic phrase. Your parents are self-employed investors, he continued. That can sometimes look volatile to an algorithm. Your income is consistent. You have been with the same firm for 5 years. You have a spotless repayment history. You are exactly what the bank algorithms love. It is purely administrative. We just need your profile to smooth out the edges. I looked at my father. Smooth out the edges? Or carry the load? It is just a signature. Stella, he snapped, his patience fraying. It stabilizes the deal. That is all. Okay, I said. Question 2. What happens if I sign this, and for some reason, the holding company cannot make the payments? My mother gasped softly. Stella, why would you even think that? Because I work in marketing. Mom, I read terms and conditions for a living. What happens? Vance nodded. Acknowledging the validity of the question, if the primary borrower defaults, the guarantor, that would be you, becomes liable for the outstanding balance. However, the property itself is collateral. In a worst-case scenario, the building would be sold to cover the debt. But if the market is down, I asked, if the building sells for less than the loan, then the guarantor is responsible for the deficiency, Vance admitted. So, I said, turning to my parents, if I sign this and you stop paying, the bank comes for me. They come for my salary. They come for the savings account I have spent 9 years building from zero. We would never let that happen, my father said, his voice rising. Do you have so little faith in us? Faith has nothing to do with it. I said, it is math. You taught me that. Remember? The numbers don't lie. Stella, you told me that when I asked for help with my dorm deposit. My father's face turned a shade of red I associated with high blood pressure and suppressed rage. This is different, he muttered. How? I asked. How is it different? When I needed money for an education, an investment in my future, you told me that handouts create weakness. You told me that if I didn't pay for it myself, I wouldn't appreciate it. So I paid for it, every cent. I ate ramen noodles for 4 years. I worked until 2 in the morning and went to class at 8. I appreciated every single dollar because I bled for them. My voice was shaking now, despite my best efforts. And now, 9 years later, you want a handout. You want me to use the credit I built, the stability I earned, to protect an asset I didn't even know existed. Why doesn't that make you weak? Dad, why doesn't that ruin your character?" Robert Jenkins stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "That is enough," he said. "We did not come here to be lectured by our daughter. We came here to offer you an opportunity to be part of this family's legacy." "Legacy," I said, standing up as well. My legs felt weak, but I locked my knees. "Is that what this is?" My mother stood up too, reaching for her purse. She looked terrified, not of me, but of the situation spiraling out of the script she had written in her head. "Maybe we should take a break," she said. "Stella is tired." "We are all tired. I am not tired," I said. "I am just clear." I looked at Vance. He was watching the family drama with a look of professional boredom. He had seen this before. He knew how it ended. "I am not signing anything today," I said. "Stella," my mother began. "I am not signing." I repeated, "I need to review this. I need to see the financials for the holding company. I need to see the appraisal of the property. And I need to talk to my own advisor." "You don't have an advisor," my father scoffed. "You would be surprised what I have." "Dad," I said, "I am very independent." I grabbed my purse. I didn't look at them as I walked to the door. I could feel their eyes on my back. My mother's desperate. My father's furious. "We need an answer by Monday." "Stella," my father called out as I reached the door, "the rate lock expires on Tuesday." I didn't answer. I walked out of the conference room, down the long hallway with the abstract art, and into the elevator. Only when the doors slid shut did I let myself slump against the metal wall. I was shaking. My hands were vibrating so hard I had to clench them into fists. It wasn't fear. It was a cocktail of rage and adrenaline that I hadn't tasted since I was 21 and realized my car wouldn't start on the morning of a final exam. I drove home in silence. No radio, no podcasts, just the sound of the tires on the wet pavement when I got back to my apartment. I didn't pour wine. I poured water. I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. The first thing I did was log into my credit monitoring service. I had checked it 2 days ago when I made the final loan payment, but I needed to see it again. I needed to see the number. 810. Excellent. I clicked on the Inquiries tab. Nothing new. Then I clicked on Personal Information. It was a section I usually ignored, just a list of addresses and employers. I scanned the list: current address, previous address, employer. Then, under a section labeled Associated Contacts, I froze. There were 2 names listed: Robert Jenkins, Eleanor Jenkins, and next to their names, a small notation: reference provided on application dated November 2023. November? That was 6 months ago. I stared at the screen. They had used me as a reference. It wasn't co-signing. It wasn't fraud. Strictly speaking, listing a relative as a reference on a credit application was common, but they hadn't asked me. They hadn't told me. They had just written my name down, banking on the fact that my stability would lend them a sheen of credibility. They had been using me before I even walked into that office. I closed the laptop, feeling dirty. It was a violation. Small, bureaucratic, but intimate. They had treated my name like a utility they could switch on whenever they needed it. I couldn't stay in the apartment. The walls felt like they were closing in. I needed to see the truth. Not the paperwork version, but the physical reality. I grabbed my keys and went back to the car. My parents lived in a suburb about 45 minutes away. It was a good neighborhood, the kind with homeowners associations that fined you for leaving your trash cans out too long, the kind where independence was easy to preach because safety was baked into the zip code. I pulled up to the house just as the sun was setting. It was a colonial, white with black shutters. It looked exactly as it had when I left for college, but also different. I parked down the street, hidden by the shade of a large oak tree, and just watched. The driveway had been repaved. It was jet black, smooth as glass. Sitting in the center of it was a car I didn't recognize, a silver SUV. I squinted. It was a Range Rover. Not brand new, but close. My father had always driven Fords, sensible, reliable cars. "You don't pay for the badge," he used to say. "You pay for the engine." Apparently, the philosophy on badges had changed. I got out of the car and walked up the driveway. I wasn't going to ring the bell. I just wanted to see. The landscaping was immaculate, not just mowed grass, but designed beds, boxwoods trimmed into perfect spheres, fresh mulch, landscape lighting that clicked on as the twilight deepened, casting dramatic shadows against the brick facade. This cost money. Real money. Thousands of dollars a season. I walked around the side of the house, toward the backyard. The kitchen window was illuminated. I stopped. The kitchen I grew up in had linoleum floors and laminate countertops. They were clean, functional, and dated. My mother had always talked about renovating it, someday, but there was always a reason not to. The roof needed fixing, the boiler was old, college was. Well, college wasn't the reason. Obviously. I peered through the window. The linoleum was gone. In its place were wide planks of hardwood. The counters were white marble, veined with gray. A massive island stood in the center, illuminated by pendant lights that looked like they belonged in an architectural magazine. A professional-grade range, 6 burners, double oven, gleamed against the back wall. It was a $40,000 kitchen, maybe 50. I stood in the damp grass, feeling the cold seep into my shoes. They had renovated the kitchen. They had bought a luxury car. They had landscaped the yard into a park, and they had done it while I was eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner. The back door opened. I jumped back, retreating into the shadows of the trellis. My father stepped out onto the deck. He was holding a glass of scotch. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket anymore, just the dress shirt, unbuttoned at the collar. He leaned against the railing, looking out at his perfect yard. He didn't look like a man in financial distress. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom. Then my mother came out. She wrapped a cashmere shawl around her shoulders. "Did she call?" my mother asked. Her voice carried clearly in the quiet evening air. "No," my father said. He took a sip of his drink. "She is just being stubborn. She gets that from you. She gets it from your mother." My mother corrected. "Do you think she will do it?" "She has to," my father said. He turned and looked back at the house, at the glowing warmth of the kitchen. "We need to stabilize the portfolio before the balloon payment hits on the commercial note. If we don't refinance, we're going to have to liquidate something real. And I am not selling this house, Eleanor. I am not moving into a condo. We can't lose the house," my mother whispered. "What would people say?" "Exactly," my father said. "We have standards to maintain. We have to keep up appearances." Keep up appearances. The phrase hung in the air, suspended like smoke. It wasn't about survival. It wasn't about necessity. It was about vanity. They were leveraging my future not to put food on the table, but to keep their neighbors from knowing they had overextended themselves. They were willing to risk my financial life so they didn't have to drive a cheaper car or cook on an electric stove. I backed away slowly, stepping carefully so the gravel wouldn't crunch. Once I was around the corner of the house, I walked faster. By the time I reached my car, I was running. I drove home with a cold, hard knot in my stomach. The nausea was gone. Nausea implies sickness, confusion. I wasn't confused anymore. I was an investigator who had just found the smoking gun. Back at my apartment, I didn't go to sleep. I brewed a pot of coffee, black and strong. I sat down at my computer. Jenkins Family Holdings, LLC. I started with the Secretary of State's business search. There it was. Registered 4 years ago. Agents, Robert and Eleanor Jenkins. I pulled the filing history. 4 years ago was right around the time I was finishing my master's degree. The degree I took out an extra $30,000 in loans for because my parents said they couldn't help with advanced degrees, any more than they could help with basic ones. I dug deeper. I searched for property records in the county database using the LLC's name. The commercial building on Oakwood Drive popped up. Purchased 3 years ago for $800,000. But it wasn't the only one. There was a duplex on the south side of the city, purchased 4 years ago, sold last year, There was a vacant lot in a developing commercial district, purchased 2 years ago. I started building a timeline in a spreadsheet. Year 1. I am a junior in college. I am working 3 jobs. Parents claim market uncertainty as a reason they can't co-sign a lease for my apartment. Reality: parents buy a timeshare in Florida. I found the deed record under their personal names. Year 4. I am graduating. I ask for help with moving costs to my first job. They send me a card with a $50 check and a note about grit. Reality: Jenkins Family Holdings is formed. Initial capitalization: $100,000. Year 6. I am promoted, but drowning in interest payments. I asked to borrow $2,000 to fix my car so I can get to work. They refuse. We don't want to enable bad habits. Reality: they buy the commercial building. Down payment: $200,000. I stared at the numbers. The timeline didn't show a family struggling to make ends meet. It showed a family aggressively moving capital. They had the money. They always had the money. But they had made a choice. Every dollar spent on my tuition was a dollar that couldn't be invested in real estate. Every check written for my rent was a check that couldn't go toward a kitchen renovation. They hadn't refused to pay for college because of a moral stance on independence. They had refused because I was an expense line item they wanted to cut, so they could reallocate the funds to asset acquisition. I was overhead, and they had successfully cut the overhead. I had paid for myself. I was a zero-cost asset. And now that the asset was fully depreciated and operating at a profit, they wanted to merge it back into the parent company. I looked at the screen until my eyes burned. The logic was so cold, so corporate, that it was almost beautiful in its cruelty. Vance had mentioned income disruptions. I went back to the search bar. I searched for court records involving Jenkins Family Holdings. Nothing. Then I searched for the property address itself. 4402 Oakwood Drive. Bingo. A mechanic's lien filed 6 months ago. A roofing company claiming non-payment of $15,000. A second lien filed 3 months ago. A plumbing contractor, $8,000. They weren't just refinancing to stabilize. They were refinancing because they were underwater. They had bought a building that needed work, spent the money on their own house instead of the repairs. And now the contractors were coming for them. They needed cash out. They needed to strip the equity from the building to pay off the liens and probably credit card debt they had racked up keeping up appearances. And they couldn't get the loan because their credit was shot. They had over-leveraged, so they needed fresh meat. They needed me. I sat back. The coffee cold in the mug next to me. I thought about the graduation photo on their fridge, the one my mother loved to point out to guests. Our daughter, the scholar, they loved my success. They loved the story of my independence, but mostly, they loved that it had been free for them. I closed the laptop. It was 3 a.m. I wasn't going to sign the papers. That was obvious. But simply refusing wasn't enough anymore. If I just said no, they would guilt me. They would tell the rest of the family I was ungrateful. They would spin the narrative, just like they always did. Poor Stella. She is so bitter. We tried to include her, but she turned her back on us. I needed more than a refusal. I needed insurance. I picked up my phone and opened my calendar. I set a reminder for Monday morning. Call Marcus Vance, ask for the full operating agreement. Then I set another reminder. Find a real estate attorney. I walked to the window of my apartment and looked out at the city lights. I had paid for this view. I had paid for the silence in this room. My father was right about one thing. Character is built through struggle. He just didn't realize that the character I had built was one that could see right through him. They wanted an adult conversation? Fine, I was going to give them one. Monday morning was a study in contrasts. Outside, the sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, the kind that usually signaled a good day. Inside the office of Sarah Klein, certified financial planner, the atmosphere was overcast with impending doom. I sat across from Sarah, a woman whose glasses were perched so precisely on her nose they looked like they had been leveled with a laser. Next to her sat David Thorne, A real estate attorney I had found through a recommendation from a colleague. I had paid a retainer I could barely afford for this hour of clarity. So, let me play this back, David said, leaning back in his chair and tenting his fingers. You are asking if it is a good idea to attach your prime credit rating to a commercial property that is currently underwater, owned by an LLC with a history of liquidity issues, in exchange for absolutely nothing? I winced. When he said it like that, it sounded insane. Basically, I said, Stella, Sarah said, her voice gentle but firm. This is not just a bad idea. This is financial suicide. She turned her monitor so I could see the spreadsheet she had created. If you co-sign this refinancing deal, that debt appears on your credit report. All $400,000 of it. It instantly destroys your debt-to-income ratio. If you want to buy a house in the next 5 years, denied. If you want to buy a car, you will get predatory interest rates, and that is the best-case scenario. And the worst case? I asked, though I already knew. The worst case is default. David said, if your parents miss payments, and given the liens you found, that seems likely. The bank does not just foreclose on the building. They come after you. They can garnish your wages. They can seize your assets. You could be paying off a building you do not own for the next 20 years. He paused, looking me dead in the eye. There is no legal upside for you here. None. It is all risk. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of validation and dread. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being ungrateful. I was being asked to walk into a burning building. I left their office with a typed summary of their advice. My shield against the inevitable guilt trip. It didn't take long for the assault to begin. My parents didn't wait for my call on Monday, when I didn't reach out by noon. My mother texted, "We are coming to the city for lunch. Meet us at the Osprey at 1. It wasn't a question. The Osprey was a high-end seafood place near my office. White tablecloths, waiters in waistcoats, and menu prices that made you check your bank balance before ordering water. It was exactly the kind of public stage my parents loved. I walked in at 1:15. They were already seated at a window table, a bottle of white wine chilling in a bucket. My father was laughing at something the waiter said, looking every inch the benevolent patriarch. When I sat down, the temperature at the table dropped 10 degrees. "You are late," my father said. Though he kept a smile plastered on his face for the benefit of the room, I was working. I said, "I ordered an iced tea." "So?" my mother asked, dispensing with the menu. "Did you sign the papers?" "Mr. Vance is waiting for the scan." I placed the folder from my meeting with Sarah and David on the table. "I am not signing." "Mom." My father sighed, a long theatrical exhale that drew the attention of the couple at the next table. "Here we go. I am not signing." I repeated, keeping my voice low. "I met with a financial advisor and an attorney this morning. They advised me that co-signing this loan would be catastrophic for my financial future. It would destroy my debt-to-income ratio and expose me to liability for a property I have no control over." My father waved a hand, dismissing 2 licensed professionals as if they were annoyances. Lawyers always look for the downside. "Stella, that is how they justify their fees. They do not understand family. They understand math." "Dad," I said, "and the math says this is a trap." My mother reached across the table. Her hand was perfectly manicured, her diamond rings catching the light. "Stella, after everything we did raising you," she said softly. Her eyes were wide, pleading. "We gave you life. We raised you to be strong. We pushed you because we knew you could handle it. And now, when we need a little bit of that strength back, you are hiding behind a consultant?" I felt the familiar hook of guilt in my chest. It was a reflex, trained into me over 3 decades, ungrateful, selfish, cold. But then I thought about the spreadsheet. I thought about the $400,000. "I am not hiding." I said, "I am making a decision. Just like you made a decision when I was 18. My father's jaw tightened. "We made you independent. You should be grateful. Look at you. You are successful. You are tough. If we had coddled you, you would be soft. We did you a favor." I looked at him, really looked at him, the expensive suit, the confidence that came from never having to choose between heat and food. I have a question. I said. My mother sipped her wine, looking wary. What? You have a renovated kitchen that looks like it cost $50,000? You drive a Range Rover? You have been buying investment properties for 4 years. I leaned forward. If you had the ability to renovate and invest, why couldn't you help me with even one semester? Just one? Why couldn't you buy my textbooks? Why did I have to work double shifts during finals week while you were buying throw pillows? The table went silent. The waiter approached to take our order, took one look at my father's face, and immediately retreated. My mother set her glass down. She straightened her posture, smoothing the napkin in her lap. We didn't want you to become entitled, she said. The word hung there. Entitled. Entitled. I repeated. Yes, she said, gaining confidence. We have seen it happen to our friends' children. They get everything handed to them, and they turn out aimless. We wanted you to have drive. We wanted you to be hungry. Hungry, I said. You wanted me to be hungry. Yes, she said. And look, it worked. I looked at her, at the absolute lack of self-awareness in her eyes. She truly believed it, or she had told herself the lie so many times that it had calcified into truth. I wasn't hungry. Mom, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. I was exhausted. I was scared. I was lonely. There is a difference between building character and watching your child drown because you think the swimming lesson is more important than the rescue. My father slammed his hand on the table, not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to make the silverware jump. That is enough. He hissed, We are not going to sit here and be interrogated by you. We are offering you a partnership. If you are too selfish to take it, then fine. But do not rewrite history to make yourself a victim. I stood up. I didn't care about the scene anymore. I am not the one rewriting history. Dad, I said, I checked the public records. I know about the liens. I know you are underwater. This isn't a partnership. It's a bailout. I turned and walked out of the restaurant. I didn't look back, but I could feel their eyes boring into my spine. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. It wasn't my parents. It was my Aunt Linda. Linda was my father's younger sister. She was the black sheep of the family because she had married a carpenter and lived in a modest ranch house 3 towns over. My parents tolerated her, but they always spoke about her with a faint air of pity. Stella? She said when I answered. I heard there was a situation. You could say that, I said, leaning back in my office chair. I was staring at my computer screen, trying to focus on ad copy, but the words were swimming. Your mother called me, Linda said. She is spinning quite a tale. Something about you abandoning them in their time of need. I laughed. A harsh, dry sound. Of course she is. Listen, honey, Linda said, her voice dropping to a hush. I shouldn't be telling you this. Your father would kill me. But you need to know something. What? Your parents? They have always been obsessed with appearances. You know that. But it is deeper than just vanity. What do you mean? When your father started his consulting business, he made a big show of being self-made. He loves that narrative. But the truth is, he had a lot of help from our parents. A lot. And he hated it. He hated feeling beholden. I waited, sensing she was circling something. When you were born, Linda continued, he made a vow that he would never let his children be spoiled. He got it into his head that money ruins blood. But the irony is, she paused. The irony is, they are terrified of anyone thinking they can't provide. So they spend money on things people can see. The house, the cars, the trips, to prove they are successful. But they refuse to spend money on things that look like help, like tuition. Because they think it makes them look like they are raising weaklings. It is a sickness. Stella, she said, they want to be seen as rich. But they want you to be seen as scrappy. It validates them. If you succeed without their money, it proves they have good genes. If they look rich while you struggle, it proves they are principled. I sat there, absorbing this twisted logic. It wasn't just greed. It was a complex psychological game where I was the pawn. Thanks. Aunt Linda, I said quietly. Just be careful, she said. When their image is threatened, they get nasty. And right now, you are threatening the image. I hung up, feeling heavier than before. That evening, I was deleting spam from my personal email when I saw a message from my mother. The subject line was, FW, loan documents, /forwarding for reference. I hesitated. I didn't want to engage, but curiosity won. I opened it. It was the refinancing contract again. She was relentless, but as I scrolled down, I realized she had been sloppy. In her haste to forward the document from her own files, she had included a trailing chain of older emails. It looked like she had searched for Stella and loan in her inbox and just forwarded the most recent thread without checking the history. I scrolled down past the lawyer's emails, past the bank's emails, and then I stopped. The date was August 14th, 9 years ago, 2 weeks before I started my freshman year. From Robert Jenkins to Eleanor Jenkins. Subject: allocation of funds. Eleanor, I spoke to the broker. If we move the $52,000 from the Vanguard education account into the liquidity pool for the duplex down payment, we can close by the end of the month. The market is heating up, and I don't want to miss this window. I know we talked about using that chunk for Stella's first 2 years, but let's be honest. She can get loans. Everyone gets loans. It will be good for her to have some skin in the game. If we keep the cash in the market, we get 6%. If we put it into the duplex, we are looking at 12% ROI plus equity. Let's pull the trigger. We can always help her out later if she really crashes. But I think the tough love angle plays better anyway. Bob. I read it again. The Vanguard education account. $52,000. I stopped breathing. There had been a fund, while I was filling out FAFSA forms, crying because I didn't know how I would pay for books. There was $52,000 sitting in an account with my name on the conceptual label, and they had taken it. They hadn't just refused to pay from their income. They had liquidated a fund specifically designated for my education to buy a duplex. 12% ROI. I was a math problem. I was an opportunity cost. They had weighed my education against a rental property, and the rental property won. And the line that killed me. I think the tough love angle plays better anyway. It wasn't a principle. It was a marketing strategy. They had branded their greed as parenting. I stood up and walked to the bathroom. I felt sick, not the nervous nausea from before, but a deep, visceral disgust. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked at the lines around my eyes that hadn't been there at 22. I remembered the stress-induced ulcers I had in junior year. I remembered the shame of declining dinner invitations because I couldn't afford a slice of pizza. I had worn that struggle like a badge of honor. I had told myself, I am doing this. I am strong. But it was all a lie. My struggle wasn't necessary. It wasn't a rite of passage. It was optional. It was a choice my parents made to maximize their portfolio. I hadn't been climbing a mountain. I had been thrown into a pit by the people who were supposed to hold the rope. I went back to the computer and printed the email. I printed it 3 times. The next day at work, I was a ghost. I went through the motions, but my mind was miles away, replaying the email over and over. My boss, Karen, called me into her office around 2. Stella, close the door, she said. I sat down, bracing myself. Had I made a mistake? Was my distraction obvious? I have some good news, she said, smiling. The VP of Creative is stepping down next month. We want you to step up. I blinked. The VP role. It was a massive leap, a significant raise, stock options. It was the kind of job that solidified a career. Karen continued, it is a big responsibility. You will be handling the global accounts. Obviously, with a role this sensitive, there is a rigorous vetting process. Standard corporate policy, background check, full credit review, financial disclosure. We need to make sure our officers are uncompromised. She pushed a packet of forms across the desk. Can you get these back to HR by Friday? I looked at the forms. Authorization for credit review. If I signed my parents' loan, That $400,000 debt would hit my report within 30 days. If the background check happened after that, or if the bank flagged me as high risk, I could lose this promotion. I could be seen as financially unstable. Uncompromised, Karen had said. My parents' request wasn't just a threat to my past. It was a direct missile aimed at my future. I took the forms. Thank you. Karen, I am honored. I walked back to my desk. The stakes had just doubled. My phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. I didn't want to answer. But I needed to end this. I picked up. Stella, she said. Her voice was different today, softer, conciliatory. What do you want? Mom, your father and I have been talking. We realized we might have been too harsh yesterday. I said nothing. We want to offer a compromise. She said, I waited. If you sign the papers, just as a guarantor, purely administrative, we are willing to work out a reimbursement plan for your student loans. I gripped the phone. What? We can treat it like a private family loan, she explained, her voice gaining that familiar, confident rhythm. Once the refinancing goes through and the capital is freed up, we can pay you back. Say, $500 a month? It would take a while, but it would be like we are finally paying for your college, an investment in harmony. I closed my eyes. She was trying to bribe me with my own money. She was offering to pay me back for the loans I took out because they stole my college fund, using the money they would get from leveraging my credit. It was a snake eating its own tail, and she wanted me to thank her for the meal. An investment in harmony, I repeated. Yes, she said. Doesn't that sound fair? We help you. You help us. That is what families do. I thought about the email. 12% ROI. No, Mom, I said. Silence. Then, a sharp intake of breath. Excuse me? I said no. I am not signing the papers. I am not accepting your reimbursement. I am not playing this game anymore. Stella, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I said, I am protecting myself. Because you never did. I heard a rustling sound, and then my father's voice came on the line. He must have been listening on speaker. You listen to me, young lady. He barked. The charm was gone. The proud father mask had dissolved, leaving only the angry, controlling investor. We made you, he said. We own your success. You think you did this? You think you are some self-made wonder? You are nothing without the foundation we gave you. You gave me nothing, I shouted, my voice cracking. You gave me a zero balance and a lecture. And look where it got you, he yelled back. You are successful. And now you think you are better than us. That is it, isn't it? You think you are too good to help your family. You think you are better than us. There it was. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about the building. It was about the fact that I had escaped. I had built a life that didn't depend on them. And they hated it. They needed me to be beholden. They needed my signature not just for the bank, but to prove that they still owned me. Yes. Dad, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. In this moment, I do think I am better than you. I hung up. My hand was shaking. I put the phone down on my desk. I looked at the HR forms for the promotion. I looked at the printed email from 2014. I wasn't just going to refuse. I was going to bury them. I picked up my pen and signed the authorization for the background check. My hand was steady. Then I pulled up the contact information for the contractor who was suing their holding company. I had found his name in the public records. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one, but this time, I wasn't the broke student begging for a textbook. I was the one with the leverage. I opened a new email draft. Subject: Information regarding Jenkins Family Holdings /4402 Oakwood Drive. I began to type. The second envelope was not made of heavy, cream-colored cardstock. It was standard white business bond, cheap and thin, with a cellophane window that revealed my address in a jagged dot matrix font. It looked like a bill, or perhaps a solicitation for car insurance. I pulled it from my mailbox on a Tuesday evening. My hand didn't shake this time. The tremors of the previous week had hardened into something cold and calcified. I walked up the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment. slitting the envelope open with my thumbnail before I even unlocked my door. It was a carbon copy of a legal summons. Plaintiff, Miller Construction Services, LLC. Defendant, Jenkins Family Holdings, LLC. Subject, breach of contract / unpaid invoices, totaling $38,450. I stepped inside my apartment and tossed the keys on the counter, smoothing the paper out under the kitchen light. There it was, the timeline I had suspected, laid out in legal black and white. The invoices were dated from 6 months ago. The work description read, residential kitchen renovation, custom cabinetry installation, hardwood flooring refinishing at primary residence. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that echoed off my walls. My parents had renovated their personal kitchen, the showpiece I had seen through the window, and billed it to their commercial holding company. They had treated their home improvement like a business expense, likely to write it off on their taxes. But then, they had run out of cash. They hadn't paid the contractor. Now, Miller Construction was suing the LLC, the same LLC my parents were desperately trying to refinance. The pieces fell into place with a sickening click. The bank wouldn't approve the refinancing because there was a pending lawsuit or a mechanic's lien on the corporate credit report. They needed a guarantor, me, to overlook the lien, to use my clean credit to mask the smell of their insolvency. They weren't stabilizing an investment. They were trying to pay off a contractor before he seized their assets. I poured myself a glass of water and drank it standing up. My parents were not evil masterminds. They were sloppy. They were two people who had spent 30 years believing that the rules of gravity did not apply to them because they were Jenkinses. They believed that if they maintained the appearance of wealth, the actual money would eventually materialize to match it. And for 30 years, it had worked, until now. 2 days later, the invasion began. I was drinking coffee on my balcony on a Saturday morning, wearing oversized sweatpants and a t-shirt, enjoying the rare silence of the city. I heard a car door slam in the parking lot below. I looked over the railing. My father's silver Range Rover was double parked behind a neighbor's sedan. I froze. They had never visited my apartment. In the 5 years I had lived here, they had come exactly 0 times. "The city is so congested," my mother would say. "We prefer you come to us." But there they were. My mother stepped out, wearing a pastel floral dress and holding a large white bakery box tied with a pink ribbon. My father was in khakis and a polo shirt, looking aggressively casual. I watched as my neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, walked by with her corgi. My mother immediately lit up. She stopped Mrs. Higgins, gesturing to the bakery box, pointing up toward my balcony, laughing with that bright tinkling sound that meant she was performing. I could see Mrs. Higgins smiling, charmed. "Look at us." The scene screamed. The devoted parents visiting their daughter, the happy family. I stepped back from the railing, my heart hammering a slow, heavy rhythm. I buzzed them in. I had to. If I didn't, they would stand in the lobby and make a scene until I looked like the villain. When I opened my apartment door, my mother swept in like a scented breeze, kissing my cheek before I could pull away. "Stella, look at this place. It is so cozy." She handed me the box. It was from the most expensive patisserie in their town. "We were in the neighborhood," my father said. Stepping in behind her, he didn't look at me. He looked at the furniture, assessing the value of my life. "We thought we would bring you some breakfast." "You were in the neighborhood?" I asked, placing the box on the counter without opening it. "You live 45 miles away." "Dad, we had an errand," he said vaguely. He walked over to my bookshelf, picking up a framed photo of me and Lena from a trip to Chicago. "We missed you this week." "Stella," my mother said. She was unpacking the box now, laying out almond croissants and fruit tarts on my counter, as if she were setting a stage. We hate how things were left at the restaurant. It felt so unfinished. I leaned against the refrigerator, crossing my arms. It felt pretty finished to me. I said, "Oh, stop," she said, waving a napkin at me playfully. "Families fight. It is what we do, but we always come back together. That is the important part." She held out a croissant. "Here, your favorite." Almond paste, not custard. I looked at the pastry. It was $18 of butter and flour. I am not hungry. I said. My father turned from the bookshelf. You are being difficult. Stella, he said. His voice was low, devoid of the warmth he had shown Mrs. Higgins in the parking lot. We are trying to reach out. We are trying to fix this. Fix what? I asked. The lawsuit? The room went deadly silent. My mother's hand froze halfway to her mouth. My father's eyes narrowed. What do you know about that? He asked. I know Miller Construction is suing the holding company for $38,000. I said, I know you renovated the kitchen and billed it to the LLC, and I know that is why you need the refinance. You need to pay them off before they get a judgment and freeze your assets. My father walked over to the counter. He placed his hands on the granite, leaning in close. That is a misunderstanding, he said. The contractor overcharged us. We are disputing the invoice. You are being sued for breach of contract. Dad, that is not a dispute. That is a failure to pay. It is a cash flow issue, he snapped. A temporary bottleneck. If you sign the paperwork, the refinance goes through. We pay the contractor, the suit goes away, and everything goes back to normal. Normal for who? I asked. For you? What about me? I get $400,000 of debt on my credit report, so you can have a marble island? My mother began to cry. It was a quiet, practiced weeping. She dabbed at her eyes with a paper napkin. Why are you so cruel? She whispered. We are drowning. Stella, we are trying to keep our heads above water. If we lose the lawsuit, if the details become public, it would be humiliating. Humiliating. I repeated. Yes, she said, looking up, her mascara perfectly intact. People look up to us. Your father has a reputation. I looked at them, really looked at them. For years, I had treated their moods like the weather. If my father was angry, I wore a raincoat. If my mother was critical, I sought shelter. I had spent my life trying to predict the forecast, trying to avoid the storms, but standing there, watching them panic not about their financial ruin, but about their reputation. Something shifted inside me. I wasn't angry anymore. Rage is hot. Rage implies you care about the outcome. I felt cold. I felt clear. I was watching two strangers who had wandered into my apartment and mistaken me for an audience member. I am not signing. I said. My voice was quiet, steady. And you need to leave. Stella. We brought breakfast. My mother pleaded. Take the croissants. I said. My father stared at me for a long moment. He looked for the crack in the armor. He looked for the little girl who wanted approval. But she wasn't there. He grabbed the car keys from the counter. Come on, Eleanor, he said. She is not in her right mind today. They left the box. I watched them from the balcony as they walked back to the car. I saw Mrs. Higgins wave again. My father waved back. A big, hearty gesture. He opened the car door for my mother. They looked perfect. I went inside and threw the croissants in the trash. 3 days later, I received an email from Marcus Vance, their attorney. It was a notification for a mediation session regarding the Miller lawsuit. My name was CC'd. I wasn't a party to the lawsuit, but my father must have insisted I be included, probably hoping that seeing the legal reality would scare me into submission. I decided to go, not to participate, to witness. The mediation was held in a neutral conference room near the courthouse. When I walked in, my parents were already there, sitting on one side of a long table. Marcus Vance was with them. On the other side sat a man in a flannel shirt, Miller, the contractor, and his lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman with a messy bun. I took a seat in the back corner, away from the table. My father turned to look at me. He nodded, satisfied. He thought I was there to save them. The mediator, a retired judge, opened the file. Let us begin, he said. For the next 2 hours, I watched my parents shrink. Miller's lawyer was brutal. She laid out the invoices. She laid out the emails where my father had promised payment. As soon as the wire clears. She laid out the photos of the finished kitchen. Mr. Jenkins, the lawyer said, you claimed the work was substandard. Yet here is a photo from your wife's Facebook page, posted 2 months ago, captioned, "Loving my dream kitchen," with a heart emoji. My mother flinched. She looked down at her hands. The lawyer continued, you have no defense for non-payment. You simply do not have the funds. We are prepared to move for a summary judgment and place a lien on your personal residence if the LLC cannot satisfy the debt. A lien on the house. I saw my father's shoulders slump. The house was the temple. The house was the symbol. If there was a lien, it would be public record. The neighbors would know. The country club would know. My father spoke up, his voice lacking its usual boom. We are in the process of restructuring some assets, he said, glancing back at me. We expect to have the liquidity within 10 days. Miller snorted. You said that 3 months ago. Bob, we have a guarantor, my father said, desperation creeping into his tone. My daughter, she is a successful executive. She is here today. The whole room turned to look at me. Miller looked at me. His lawyer looked at me. The judge looked at me. I sat perfectly still. My father's eyes were pleading. Please. They said, just play the part. I looked at the contractor. He looked tired. His hands were rough, calloused. He just wanted to get paid for the work he had done. I stood up. I am here as an observer only. I said clearly, I am not a guarantor. I have not signed any restructuring agreement, and I do not intend to. The silence in the room was absolute. My father turned purple. My mother let out a sob. The judge looked back at my father. Well, Mr. Jenkins, it appears your restructuring plan is hypothetical. I walked out. I didn't wait for them in the hallway. I took the stairs down and walked 6 blocks before I caught a cab. I should have felt triumphant. I had held the line, but I just felt exhausted. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, knowing the driver was drunk and blamed the road. That night, I called Lena. We had a scheduled boundary rehearsal session. She came over with Thai food. We sat on my floor, the cartons spread out on the coffee table. Okay, Lena said, holding up a spring roll like a baton. Scene. Your mother calls you tomorrow. She says, Stella, you humiliated us in front of the contractor. How could you be so cold? Usage. Go. I took a deep breath. I would say, Mom, I didn't humiliate you. The facts humiliated you. I just refused to lie about them. Lena nodded. Good, but too defensive. Try again. Shorter. I didn't cause the problem, so I am not the solution. I tried. Better, Lena said. But here's the kicker. What if she says, we just wanted to be close to you. We wanted to do this together. I hesitated. That was the hook, the desire for closeness. Even now, after everything, a small, stupid part of me wanted them to be my parents. I wanted them to be the people who cheered for me, not the people who used me. I don't know, I admitted. Stella, Lena said, putting the spring roll down. You have to mourn them. What? You are waiting for them to wake up and be the parents you deserve. They are not in a coma. They are awake. This is who they are. You have to mourn the parents you wanted so you can deal with the parents you have. I felt tears prick my eyes. It was the truth I had been avoiding. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin. Leo. Leo was 22, fresh out of college. He was the golden boy of the extended family, charming, athletic, and completely oblivious to the tension between me and my parents. Hey, cuz. The text read, Are you going to Aunt Eleanor's BBQ next weekend? I wanted to thank Uncle Bob in person. I frowned. Thank him for what? I typed back. 3 dots appeared. For the seed money. He is putting 20 grand into my startup. Can you believe it? He said he believes in investing in family. He is the best. I stared at the screen. $20,000. My father, who couldn't pay his contractor, who was being sued, who needed my signature to save his house, had promised $20,000 to my cousin for a tech startup. He didn't have the money. He was going to use the refinancing money, the money I was supposed to secure, to play venture capitalist with his nephew. And the phrase, investing in family, the independence rule wasn't a rule, it was a weapon. They hadn't refused to help me because of principle. They had refused to help me because I wasn't the right kind of investment. I was a daughter. I was supposed to be dutiful. Leo was a man. He was a potential star. He was a vanity project. I felt the last thread of attachment snap. I texted Leo back. "That is great news. Leo, I won't be at the BBQ." I put the phone down. Lena was watching me. "What happened?" I told her. She didn't look surprised. She just looked sad. "Okay," she said. "So what is the move?" I stood up and walked to my desk. I pulled out a fresh legal pad. "I am done debating," I said. "I am going to make them an offer." The next day, I drove to my parents' house. I didn't call first. I parked on the street. Not in the driveway. I walked past the perfect landscaping, past the new Range Rover. My mother answered the door. She looked shocked to see me. Her eyes were puffy, likely from the fallout of the mediation. "Stella, I need to talk to you and Dad. 5 minutes." She let me in. The house smelled of lavender and denial. We sat in the living room. My father came in from the study. He looked aged. The stress was eating him alive. But he still wore a collared shirt on a Sunday. I didn't sit down. I heard about Leo. I said. My father stiffened. "That is private business. You promised him $20,000. I said, "Money you don't have. Money you were planning to get from the loan I was supposed to sign." "It is an investment," my father shouted. "He has a brilliant idea." "And I didn't?" I asked quietly, when I wanted to go to journalism school, when I wanted to buy a reliable car so I wouldn't freeze on the highway. I wasn't a good investment. "You are a woman," he blurted out. The words hung in the air. He looked shocked that he had said it. My mother gasped. He tried to backtrack. You needed to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. A man needs capital to build. A woman needs resilience." I nodded slowly. There it was. The misogyny wrapped in a rugged individualism wrapper. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "I am leaving," I said, "and I am never coming back. But before I go, I have one request." I placed the paper on the coffee table. It was a simple affidavit I had typed up. I, Robert Jenkins, and I, Eleanor Jenkins, acknowledge that we knowingly and voluntarily withheld financial support from our daughter, Stella Jenkins, for her higher education. Despite having the funds available in a designated account, we further acknowledge that we prioritized real estate investments over her tuition. We acknowledge that our claims of teaching independence were a cover for financial prioritization. "Sign it," I said. "What?" my mother whispered, looking at the paper as if it were radioactive. "Sign it. If you believe what you did was right, if you believe it was for my own good, then put your name on it. Acknowledge the truth. Tell the world that you chose to buy a duplex instead of sending your daughter to college." My father laughed nervously. "We are not signing that. That is ridiculous." "Why?" I asked. "Is it untrue?" "It is aggressive," my mother said. "It makes us look bad. It makes you look like who you are." I said, "I am not signing a confession," my father yelled. "It is only a confession if you are guilty." "Dad," I said, "otherwise, it is just a history statement." He stood up, his face red. "Get out. Get out of my house." I looked at them one last time. I thought about the family BBQ next weekend. I knew what they would say. They would tell Aunt Linda and Cousin Leo that I was jealous, that I was bitter, that I had refused to help them because I was selfish. They would rewrite the story because the truth was too ugly to display on the mantel. I picked up the paper. "I didn't expect you to sign it." I said, "But I needed to see you refuse." I walked to the door. "Stella," my mother called out, her voice cracking. "If you walk out that door—" "What?" I asked, turning back. "You will cut me off?" I smiled. It was a genuine smile. For the first time in weeks. "You already did that. Mom," 9 years ago. I walked out. I sat in my car for a long time. I didn't drive away immediately. I watched the house. I saw the curtain in the living room twitch. They were watching me. They were terrified. Not that I would leave, but that I would talk. I pulled out my phone. I opened the voice memo app. I had recorded the entire conversation. I had recorded the admission about Leo. I had recorded the line, "You are a woman. A man needs capital." I wasn't going to post it on Facebook. I wasn't going to send it to the family group chat. Not yet. But I had it. I drove home. When I got to my apartment, I started a new folder on my computer. I labeled it Insurance. I dragged the recording into it. I dragged the scanned emails into it. I dragged the screenshots of the public records and the lawsuit summary into it. I was done being the daughter. I was done being the victim. If they wanted to tell lies about me to the extended family, fine, let them talk. But if they tried to come for my career, if they tried to damage my credit, if they tried to use their reputation to hurt me, I patted the laptop. I had the nuke, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to use it. The invitation came via a handwritten note, slipped into my mailbox 3 days after I walked out of their house. It was on my mother's personal stationery, heavy cream paper with a botanical border. "Stella, please come for dinner on Friday. No business, no arguments, just a family meal. We want to apologize for how things got out of hand. We made a roast chicken, just the way you like it. 7 Palma love, Mom." It was the specific mention of the roast chicken that did it. It was a callback to a simpler time, to the Sunday dinners before I understood what an interest rate was, before I realized that the warmth in our kitchen was conditional. I knew I should not go. My body knew it. My stomach tightened the moment I read the card. But the word apologize was a lure I had not yet learned to ignore completely. It dangled there, shiny and hopeful. Maybe the recording I had made, the confrontation about Leo, the sheer force of my departure. Maybe it had finally broken through. I arrived at 7 o'clock sharp. The house was glowing. Every window was lit, casting warm squares of yellow light onto the manicured lawn. The Range Rover was parked in the driveway, gleaming under the floodlights. I rang the bell. My mother answered immediately. She was wearing a silk dress, her hair perfectly blown out. She looked younger, softer than she had during the mediation. "Stella," she breathed, pulling me into a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and white wine. "Thank you for coming." I stepped inside. The house smelled incredible. Rosemary, garlic, lemon. It smelled like safety. "We are in the dining room," she said, guiding me down the hall. I walked into the dining room and stopped dead. The table was set with the good china, the wedding china that only came out for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Crystal goblets sparkled in the candlelight. A centerpiece of fresh hydrangeas sat in the middle, but there were 4 place settings. My father stood by the sideboard, pouring wine, and sitting in the 4th chair, nursing a tumbler of sparkling water, was Marcus Vance. The attorney looked up and smiled, a tight, professional expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Good evening, Ms. Jenkins." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You said no business," I said, turning to my mother. "You wrote it in the card." "We just want to talk," my father said, walking over with a glass of wine for me. He tried to press it into my hand, but I kept my arms at my sides. "Marcus is here as a friend. He has an idea that we think it solves everything. It is a celebration." "Really?" my mother added, her voice high and brittle. "Please, Stella, sit down. Don't make a scene before we have even eaten." The trap was so obvious, so clumsy, that it was almost insulting. They had staged an intervention. But instead of an addiction counselor, they had hired a corporate lawyer. I did not sit. I stood behind the chair they had designated for me. "I am not signing the loan." I said, "If that is why we are here, I am leaving. Please, sit," Vance said. His voice was smooth, calming. The voice of a man who billed $400 an hour to de-escalate conflicts. "It is not the same loan. We have restructured the proposal entirely based on your concerns." "My concerns," I repeated, You said you didn't want to take on risk without reward, my father said, taking his seat at the head of the table. You said it wasn't a partnership. We heard you. Stella, he gestured to the empty chair. We want to make you a partner. I looked at the three of them. My parents, desperate and terrifyingly hopeful. The lawyer, the mercenary they had hired to broker a deal with their own daughter, curiosity, that fatal flaw, made me pull out the chair. I sat down. Dinner was served with surreal normalcy. My mother passed the potatoes. My father asked about the weather in the city. Vance made polite small talk about the traffic. We ate roast chicken while the elephant in the room grew so large it was practically crushing the crystal. Once the plates were cleared, Vance reached into his briefcase, which had been sitting by his feet. He pulled out a document. It was thinner than the last one. Here's the proposal, he said, sliding it across the tablecloth. It avoided the gravy boat by an inch. I didn't touch it. Just tell me. My father leaned forward. We want you to co-sign the refinancing for a term of 24 months, just 2 years. In exchange, you will be added to the operating agreement of Jenkins Family Holdings, LLC. I looked at him. You are giving me equity? Vance cleared his throat. Not equity. Precisely. We are offering you a conditional interest as a beneficiary. I picked up the document then. I flipped past the preamble to the definitions section. Conditional interest. I read the clause. The guarantor, Stella Jenkins, shall be entitled to 5% of the net proceeds from the eventual sale of the property, provided that the guarantor remains in good standing with the managing members, Robert and Eleanor Jenkins, and does not engage in any conduct detrimental to the reputation or financial stability of the company. I read it twice. Good standing. Detrimental to the reputation. I looked up. This isn't ownership, I said. This is an allowance you can revoke if I make you mad. It is a safety clause, my mother said quickly. Standard language. No. Mom, I said, pointing to the paper. Standard language defines good standing with metrics. This defines it as your opinion. If I sign this, and 2 years from now you decide I was rude at Thanksgiving, you can strip me of the interest. If I date someone you don't like, is that detrimental to the reputation? If I refuse to come to a dinner party, it is about trust. Stella, my father said, his voice hardening, we are offering you a piece of the family legacy. 5% could be worth $50,000 when we sell, or it could be worth 0 if you decide I am not grateful enough. I said, I closed the folder. You are asking me to risk $400,000 of my credit for a lottery ticket that you print and you control. Vance interjected, the clause is negotiable. Ms. Jenkins, we could add arbitration. I am not arbitrating a relationship with my parents, I snapped. The veneer of the nice dinner cracked. My father slammed his napkin onto the table. What do you want from us? He demanded. We feed you. We welcome you. We offer you money. And you look at everything like it is a bomb. You are so cold. Stella, when did you get so cold? I looked at him. I looked at the man who had forwarded an email calling my education a bad ROI. I learned it from you. Dad, I said, I am just finally applying the lesson. My mother let out a sob. It was a loud, jagged sound. She buried her face in her hands. I can't take this, she wailed. I can't take this fighting. We are a family. Why do you hate us? The room felt suffocating. The smell of the roast chicken was suddenly nauseating. It was a performance of grief, designed to make me feel like a monster for reading the fine print. I stood up. I don't hate you, I said. I just don't trust you. And you have given me absolutely no reason to start. I grabbed my purse. Stella, sit down, my father roared. We are not finished. I said. I walked out of the dining room. I heard Vance murmuring something low and urgent. I heard my mother crying. I heard my father's heavy footsteps following me to the hall. But stopping at the archway, I walked out the front door into the cool night air. I got into my car. My hands shaking so hard, I dropped the keys between the seat and the console. I had to take 3 deep breaths before I could fish them out and start the engine. I drove away fast. watching the perfect house shrink in my rearview mirror. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I didn't look at it until I was safely parked in my own garage. It was a text from my father. "We can make this ugly if you want." I stared at the screen. It wasn't a threat of violence. My father wasn't a violent man. He was a political man, a social man. Ugly meant rumors. Ugly meant telling the extended family I was unstable. Ugly meant calling my boss and expressing concern about my stress levels. Ugly meant weaponizing the very reputation they were so desperate to protect, burning me to save themselves. He was threatening to destroy the independent life I had built because it was the only leverage he had left. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called David Thorne, the attorney I had consulted with earlier. I didn't care about the cost anymore. "He can't legally force you to sign," David said over the phone. "But the threat, that is harassment, borderline extortion, depending on what he actually does." "What do I do?" I asked. I was pacing my apartment, wearing a path in the rug. "Do not engage," David said. "Do not reply to the text. If you sign anything under duress, we can argue it is void later, but it is messy. The best defense right now is a paper trail. You need to formally state your position." I sat down at my computer. I began to draft a document. Not a contract, a declaration. To Robert and Eleanor Jenkins and Marcus Vance, Esquire. From Stella Jenkins. Final decision regarding financing of 4402 Oakwood Drive. I am writing to formally decline all requests to co-sign, guarantee, or otherwise participate in the refinancing of the property located at 4402 Oakwood Drive, or any other assets held by Jenkins Family Holdings, LLC. I further demand that you immediately cease using my name, credit history, or professional profile in any discussions with lenders, creditors, or contractors. I have not authorized, and do not authorize, the use of my personal information for your business dealings. Regarding the text message received from Robert Jenkins on October 24th, stating, "We can make this ugly if you want." I have retained a copy of this communication. Any attempt to damage my professional reputation, contact my employer, or harass me will be met with immediate legal action. I read it over. It was cold. It was hard. It was necessary. I didn't send it yet. I wanted to wait until I was calmer. But the universe, or rather, my parents, didn't wait. On Tuesday, I walked into my office to find a bouquet of flowers on my desk, white lilies, my mother's favorite. There was no card. I frowned. I asked the receptionist, Jessica, about them. "Oh, a delivery came this morning," she chirped. "And your dad called. He was so sweet." My stomach dropped. "My dad called? Here?" "Yeah, to the main line," Jessica said. "He just wanted to double-check the address for the flowers. He chatted for a minute, asked how you were doing. He mentioned you have been under a lot of pressure lately and seemed really worried. He asked if you were taking your vacation days." I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. He hadn't called to check the address. He knew the address. He had called to plant a seed, under a lot of pressure. Worried. He was painting a picture of a woman on the edge of a breakdown. A woman who might not be fit for a VP promotion. A woman who was unstable. It was a subtle, friendly, plausible sabotage. "Thank you, Jessica," I said, keeping my voice steady. I took the flowers into the break room and dropped them, vase and all, into the trash bin. The glass shattered with a satisfying crash. They had crossed the line. The workplace was the one zone I had kept pure, the one place where I was just Stella the professional, not Stella the disappointed daughter. I went back to my desk and closed the door. I pulled up the contact information for Miller Construction's legal representation. It was the nuclear option. If I reached out to the people suing my parents, I was effectively siding with the enemy, but my parents were no longer acting like allies. I dialed the number, law office. "This is Sarah." "Hi," I said. "My name is Stella Jenkins. I am calling regarding the lawsuit against Jenkins Family Holdings. I am the daughter of the defendants." There was a pause. Yes? The voice became guarded. I want to provide a statement for the record. I said, I have reason to believe my parents are representing to the court, and to you, that I am a guaranteed source of funding for their settlement. I am calling to correct that record. I am not, and will not be, providing any funds or signatures for Jenkins Family Holdings. I waited. Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. The receptionist said, I will pass this to the attorney immediately. Would you be willing to put that in an affidavit? Yes. I said, send it over. I hung up. I had just cut off their escape route. Without the promise of my backing, Miller Construction would move for a judgment. They would put a lien on the house. My parents would face the one thing they feared more than bankruptcy: public embarrassment. I expected rage. I expected my father to drive to my office and scream. Instead, I got silence for 2 days. Then, on Thursday evening, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. I answered. Stella? Her voice was small, broken. What happened? Mom, did the contractor call? She ignored the question. We can pay them off, she said. Your loans? I froze. What? We found a way, she said. Your father. He has a dormant retirement account from his old firm. We can liquidate it. It has about $30,000 in it. It is not everything, but it would wipe out a huge chunk of what you paid. We can write you a check. I listened to her breathing on the other line. $30,000. It was the money I had begged for when I was 20. It was the money that would have saved me from panic attacks and hunger. Why now? I asked. Because we love you, she said, and we want to help. We want to show you that we are on your team. But? I asked. There is a but, Mom. I know there is. She hesitated. We just need you to sign the refinancing first, she whispered. The penalty for liquidating the retirement account is high. We need the loan capital to cover the taxes and the contractor. If you sign, we get the cash, we pay the contractor, and we give you the $30,000. I closed my eyes. It wasn't a gift. It was a bribe, and it was a bribe paid with my own future credit. They were offering to give me $30,000 of my own potential liability. It was affection as currency. Compliance was the price tag. They truly didn't understand. They thought money was the only language I spoke because it was the only language they spoke. They thought they could buy my trust back with a check, forgetting that trust is not a commodity you can refinance. Keep the money. Mom, I said. Stella, please. It is $30,000. I don't want your money. I said, I want you to leave me alone. I hung up. I sat in the silence of my apartment. I looked at the walls I had painted, the books I had bought. I was done. I was done negotiating. I was done explaining. I was done hoping that if I just found the right combination of words, they would turn into different people. I needed to end this. Not with a text, not with a phone call. I needed to end it in person, with witnesses, with paper, and with a finality that would close the door forever. I called David Thorne. I need you to come with me to a meeting. I said, when? He asked. Tomorrow. I said, at their house. I'm going to bring the affidavit for the contractor. I said, and I'm going to bring a cease and desist regarding my workplace. And I want you there to make sure they understand that if they contact my boss one more time, I will sue them for harassment. You are sure about this? David asked. This is the scorched earth approach. I looked at the insurance folder on my desktop. They burned the earth 9 years ago. David, I said, I'm just walking through the ashes. I spent the rest of the night preparing. I printed the emails, the one about the college fund, the one about the tough love strategy. I printed my loan repayment history, every single payment, a receipt of my independence. I put it all in a black binder. I wasn't going there to argue. I wasn't going there to get an apology. I was going there to deliver a verdict. My parents had spent a decade telling everyone I was independent. They had worn my struggle like a costume, bragging about my grit while hiding their own greed. Tomorrow, I was going to give them exactly what they asked for. I was going to be fully, completely, terrifyingly independent, and it was going to cost them everything. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor of the Halloway and Associates building felt different this time, when I had made this journey 2 weeks ago. I had been a daughter, nervous, hopeful, desperate for a reason to say yes. I had been looking for a way to save my parents without drowning myself. Now, I was not a daughter. I was a counterparty. David Thorne stood next to me. He was a tall man with a calm, weathered face and a briefcase that looked like it had seen actual battles. He didn't say anything to reassure me. He didn't tell me it would be okay. He just checked his watch and adjusted his cuffs. I appreciated that. I didn't need reassurance. I needed a witness. I held my own folder against my chest. It was a black binder, 1 inch thick. Inside was the autopsy of my relationship with my parents. The door slid open. The smell of expensive leather and furniture polish hit me again. The receptionist looked up, her smile faltering when she saw David. She knew who he was. "They are waiting in conference room B," she said, her voice dropping an octave. We walked down the long hallway with the abstract art. I listened to the click of my heels on the marble. It was a sharp, military rhythm. Click, click, click. I opened the heavy oak door. The scene was almost identical to the first meeting, the panoramic view of the city, the mahogany table. Marcus Vance at the head. My parents on the side, but the energy was different. My parents were smiling. It was the confident, benevolent smile of people who believed they had won. They saw me walk in. They saw the binder, and they assumed it was the signed paperwork. They assumed the family dinner and the reimbursement offer had worked. They thought I had come to surrender. "Stella," my father said. Standing up, he looked rested. His suit was crisp. "I'm glad you came to your senses. We were just telling Marcus that you likely needed a few days to cool off." He reached out a hand. I walked past him and took the seat I had occupied last time. David sat next to me, placing his briefcase on the table with a heavy thud. My father's hand was left hanging in the air. He slowly lowered it, his smile tightening at the corners. "Who is this?" he asked, looking at David. "This is David Thorne," I said. "He is my attorney." My mother let out a small, nervous laugh. "Stella, why do you need an attorney? We are all family here. Marcus is looking out for all of us. Marcus represents you." "Mom," I said, "David represents me." Marcus Vance leaned forward, his eyes narrowing slightly as he assessed David. "Mr. Thorne, I wasn't aware Miss Jenkins had retained counsel. We are just here to finalize the guarantor agreement. It is a standard signing. There will be no signing." David said. His voice was deep, gravelly, and completely devoid of emotion. My father sat down slowly. The air in the room seemed to vanish. "What do you mean?" my father asked. "We had a deal. We offered the reimbursement. We offered the 5% interest." I opened the black binder. "I did not agree to a deal," I said. "I told you I was done. But you didn't listen. You sent flowers to my office. You called my receptionist. You tried to use my workplace as leverage." I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "This is a formal cease and desist," I said. "It states that you are prohibited from contacting my employer, my colleagues, or any professional associates regarding my personal financial matters. If you attempt to contact my workplace again, I will file a lawsuit for tortious interference with my employment contract." My mother gasped. "Stella, you would sue us? If you threaten my livelihood?" I asked. "Yes, in a heartbeat." My father looked at the paper, then at me. His face was turning a mottled red. "This is absurd," he spat. "We called to send you flowers. We were being nice. You are twisting everything into an attack. You are paranoid. I am prepared." I corrected him. I turned the page in the binder. "I am also here to formally decline your request to co-sign the loan for 4402 Oakwood Drive. I am declining your offer of a conditional interest in the company, and I am placing a statement on the record regarding the history of my financial relationship with you." "Statement?" Vance asked, looking bored but alert. "What statement?" I pulled out the email chain, the one I had found in the forwarded documents, the one dated August 14th, 9 years ago. I held it up. "Do you recognize this?" I asked my father. He squinted at it. It is an email. So what? I began to read. My voice was steady. I didn't look at the paper. I knew the words by heart. I looked at my mother. Subject: allocation of funds. If we move the $52,000 from the Vanguard education account into the liquidity pool for the duplex down payment, we can close by the end of the month. I know we talked about using that chunk for Stella's first 2 years, but let's be honest. She can get loans. Everyone gets loans. It will be good for her to have some skin in the game. I think the tough love angle plays better anyway. Silence. Absolute, vacuum-sealed silence. My mother's face went white. She looked at my father, then at the table. "Where did you get that?" my father whispered. "Mom sent it to me," I said, by accident. When she forwarded the loan documents, I placed the email on the table next to the cease and desist. "You have been telling the family, the neighbors, and probably yourselves, that you refused to pay for my college because you wanted to build my character. You said you wanted me to be independent. You painted yourselves as principled parents making a hard choice for the good of your child." I leaned forward, but that was a lie. You had the money. It was sitting in an account with my name on it. You just wanted a duplex more than you wanted me to graduate debt-free. You stole my education to buy a rental property. "Stella," my mother said, her voice shaking. "It wasn't stealing. It was reallocation. You thought the tough love angle played better." I finished for her. "It was a marketing strategy. You branded your greed as virtue." Marcus Vance cleared his throat. He picked up the email, glanced at it, and set it back down. "Ms. Jenkins, while this is emotionally charged, it is legally irrelevant. Your parents were under no obligation to fund your education. The funds, regardless of the nickname education account, belonged to them. They had the right to invest as they saw fit." "I know." I said, "I am not suing for the money. Mr. Vance, I am establishing a pattern." I turned the page again. I revealed the spreadsheet of the public records, the dates of the property purchases, the dates of the liens, the timeline of their renovations versus my requests for help. "This is not a family misunderstanding." I said to Vance, "This is a pattern of financial maneuvering where I am used as a resource or a casualty, depending on what is convenient, and I am done being both." My father slammed his hand on the table. "So that is it?" he shouted. "You are going to let us sink? You are going to let the contractor put a lien on the house? You are going to let us be humiliated because of an email from 9 years ago?" I looked at him. "I am not letting you sink. Dad, you drilled the hole in the boat. I am just refusing to give you my life jacket." He stared at me, his chest heaving. "You are ungrateful," he hissed. "We gave you everything. We gave you a home. We gave you a name. You gave me a loan." I said, "And I paid it off." My mother reached across the table. She was crying now, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. "Stella, please, we did what we thought was best. We really did. We thought if you fought for it, you would value it more. We wanted you to be strong." I looked at her tears. I used to be so afraid of them. I used to think they were evidence of my failure as a daughter. Now, I saw them for what they were, a defense mechanism. "You did what was best?" I asked softly. "Yes," she sobbed. I looked around the room. I looked at the expensive suits, the leather chairs, the view of the city. I looked at the document asking me to risk $400,000 so they could pay off a kitchen renovation they couldn't afford. Best for who? I asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. Was it best for me to work night shifts until my hands shook? Was it best for me to have panic attacks about tuition? Was it best for me to start my adult life $100,000 in the hole? Or was it best for you? Best for your portfolio? Best for your kitchen? Best for your story about being self-made? My mother didn't answer. She just wept. My father looked away. He couldn't meet my eyes. And then, the final piece fell into place. David Thorne reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a single sheet of paper that I hadn't seen before. There is one more thing, David said. He slid the paper toward Vance. My team ran a title search on the Oakwood property this morning, just to be thorough. David said, "We found a pending listing agreement in the MLS database. It hasn't gone live yet, but it is signed." I frowned. "What does that mean?" David looked at me. "Your parents aren't refinancing the building to hold it. Stella, they are refinancing it to sell it." I looked at my father. He flinched. "The plan," David continued, addressing the room, "seems to be to use Stella's credit to secure a bridge loan. That loan would pay off the mechanic's liens and clear the title. Once the title is clear, you intend to sell the building and the business." David turned to Vance. "And based on the asking price in the listing agreement, the net proceeds after paying off the new loan would be significant. But if Stella signs as a guarantor for a refinance, and you sell the property 6 months later, she carries all the risk during the transition, and you walk away with the equity." I stared at my parents. They were leaving. They weren't trying to save the business. They were cashing out. They were going to use my credit to clean up their mess, sell the building, take the profit, and move. And they hadn't told me. The conditional interest of 5%? It was a joke. If they sold the building in 6 months, they could easily claim I wasn't in good standing and give me nothing. "You were going to move," I said. The realization washed over me, cold and numbing. My father shrugged. It was a small, defeated movement. "We are tired. Stella. We wanted to retire. Florida. The market is high. We thought, if we could just clear the debts, we could start over. Start over." I repeated, using me as the mop. "We would have paid off the loan when we sold." My father insisted. "You wouldn't have been hurt. But you didn't ask me." I said, "You didn't tell me. You manipulated me. You tried to trick me into signing a 20-year liability for a 6-month flip." I stood up. I picked up my binder. "I am leaving now," I said. David stood up with me. "Mr. Vance," David said, "any further communication regarding this matter should be directed to my office. If your clients attempt to contact Ms. Jenkins directly, we will seek a restraining order." And I meant what I said about her employer. One more phone call, one more flower delivery, and we will file for damages. Vance nodded. He looked tired. He closed his folder. "Understood. Mr. Thorne." I looked at my parents one last time. My mother was still crying, but it was quiet now, resigned. My father was staring out the window at the city skyline, looking like a man who had watched his empire turn to dust. They looked small. For 32 years. They had been the giants in my world, the arbiters of truth, the gatekeepers of approval. Now, they were just 2 elderly people with bad credit and a lot of regrets. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt grief. I grieved for the parents I had wanted. I grieved for the idea that if I just worked hard enough, if I was just successful enough, they would finally see me as a person and not an asset. But beneath the grief, there was relief. It was the relief of putting down a heavy backpack after a 10-mile hike. I walked to the door. "Stella," my mother whispered. I stopped, my hand on the handle. "We love you," she said. I turned back. "I know you do." "Mom," I said, "in your own way. But your love is too expensive. I can't afford it anymore." I opened the door and walked out. I walked down the hallway. Click, click, click. I didn't look back. The fallout began 3 days later. It started with a text from Aunt Linda. "Your mother is telling everyone you hired a shark lawyer to threaten them. She says you are trying to bankrupt them out of spite. I told her to save it. I am proud of you. Kid." Then came the call from my cousin Leo. He sounded drunk. "You really screwed Uncle Bob, didn't you? He told me the investment deal is off. Thanks a lot. Stella, way to look out for family." I blocked his number. Then came the flying monkeys, the second cousins, the family friends, Facebook messages. "I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive. Family is everything. You only get one set of parents." I didn't reply to any of them. I archived the messages in the insurance folder and went about my day. I got the promotion at work. The background check cleared without a hitch. My credit score remained 810. I bought a bottle of wine, a $60 bottle, and drank it on my balcony, toasting the skyline. I heard through the grapevine that my parents sold the Range Rover. The house wasn't listed yet, but the landscapers stopped coming. The perfect boxwoods started to grow wild. Miller Construction got their judgment. There was a lien on the house now. The neighbors knew. The secret was out. I wondered if my father felt independent now. 1 week after the meeting, I came home to find a small envelope in my mailbox. It had no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. I carried it upstairs. I debated burning it. I debated shredding it, but I opened it. There was no letter, no check, no legal document. It was a photograph. It was a picture of me at my kindergarten graduation. I was 5 years old, wearing a paper mortarboard hat and holding a diploma made of construction paper. I was grinning, missing a front tooth. My parents were on either side of me, beaming, looking young and invincible. It was a weaponized memory, a reminder of when I was small, compliant, and theirs. I flipped the photo over. In my mother's looping script, she had written a single line. "We always believed in you." I stared at the words. It was the final rewrite, the final attempt to spin the narrative. They weren't apologizing for the pain. They were claiming credit for the result. They were telling themselves that my strength, my success, my independence, it was all because of them. They were telling themselves that they had engineered this. "We always believed in you." Translation: You survived, so we must have done a good job. I walked to the kitchen. I had a magnet on my fridge. It held up my student loan payoff confirmation letter. I looked at the photo. I looked at the letter. I didn't put the photo on the fridge. I walked to the trash can. I hesitated for a second, just a second, because that little girl in the picture looked so happy. But she wasn't me. She was the prologue. I am the story now. I dropped the photo into the bin. I went back to the fridge and looked at the confirmation letter. Paid in full. I smiled. Yes, it was. Thank you so much for listening to My Parents Said I Should Be Independent and Refused to Pay for My College, 9 years later. This was a story about money, yes, but mostly about the hidden costs of transactions we make with the people we love. I hope Stella's journey resonated with you. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to set a boundary that cost you a relationship? If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of karma, justice, and the messy reality of being human, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. Until next time, keep your credit score high and your boundaries higher.